Hi, this is a Humanist Foundation. I'm Saeed, and we have here Vincent Downing, and we have a special guest today, Curt Collier. He's a scientist, activist, educator, community organizer. Curt is a leader of both New York Society for Ethical Culture and Bergen County Society for Ethical Culture. Curt is currently professor at Fairleigh-Dickinson University, teaching ethics and philosophy of science. Hi, Curt.
Hey, Saeed. How are you, Vincent? How are you all? Good to see you.
Thank you. Thank you for coming again to Humanist Foundation. We have a list of questions we would like to ask you. What brought you to ethical culture?
Actually, I was teaching at Texas Tech University in Lubbock, Texas, and I was teaching a course in speech and hearing and how our body evolved to adapt to speech and hearing. And during one of my classes, one of the students stopped me because I was talking about the evolution of the inner ear from the mandible, the jawbone, and how they were once connected. And you can look at someone's face and basically predict certain kind of morphologies. And one of the students stopped me and she said, "Hey, do we have to know this?" And I said, "Yeah, it's I'm teaching the class." And she goes, "Well, I'm a Christian and I don't believe in evolution," and, found it offensive. And I said, "Well, okay." I was trying to be nice and say, "I understand that. A lot of people have the same beliefs as you and very deep beliefs, but just so I know how many other people in this room also don't believe in evolution." And they all raised their hand. And I thought, wow, this is a problem. This is a master's level class at Texas Tech University in science. And so I thought that we needed an alternative. I didn't feel comfortable in churches, even Unitarian congregations. I didn't feel comfortable going back to synagogue. And so I thought we should start something new. I read a bunch of books to see what an alternative might be out there that we could join or I could join, and finally found this thing called Ethical Culture in New York. I'd never heard of it, never had been up to New York City at that point. And sure enough, I contacted them, and it took about 5 years, but eventually they reached back out to me and I said, "Okay, we're going to start an ethical culture society in Texas." I flew speakers in from the East Coast. I got my parents' RV. I drove to several cities in Texas and eventually founded the Austin Ethical Culture Society. So that's how it got started. And it was basically, I knew I wanted to be a communitarian. It's very important to be a part of a community. And I was looking for a communitarian model that basically matched my understanding of the world.
Interesting. Evolution. It's a big part of it.
Yeah.
The second question is, what is the next step people should do after they leave the church or their belief?
Yeah, I've had some time to think about that question. I know this is a very important question for you all, and that's a lot of people who are watching this show. I teach philosophy on the side. I've done it for many, many years. And one of the things I do with my students on the first day of class is I hand them a white sheet of paper and a red crayon, and I have them all draw something meaningful. So all the students laugh at me for a second. Then I said, "No, draw something that's meaningful or something you like." And they all draw pictures, and then I have them share them in the first day of philosophy class. And they're pretty much on a theme: family, friends, the school, sports type of thing. And then I say, "Well, what's the commonality?" And of course, a lot of people jump then. I go, "No, what's the most common thing?" And people try to delve down thinking I'm asking a deep philosophical question. And then finally someone says, "They're all red," because I gave them a red crayon, right? Yeah. And I said, that's kind of how we think about the world. We are handed a set of axioms, we would call them in philosophy, sets of beliefs, like crayons. And with that, we can construct all kinds of realities, just like they did. They can draw families, friends, important things, religious symbols. They can draw all kinds of stuff. The problem is we all start with kind of a limited set of tools that we've been handed by our culture. In philosophy, we have a branch that studies that, phenomenology, which is, why do we believe the things we believe, and how do they shape our way of seeing the world? I was raised in rural South Texas along the Mexican border. I was raised in a culture called Tex-Mex. Love it. Love the food, love the music. But I was enculturated with certain beliefs about the nature of reality and how the world operated, right? As we all are. And to me, one of those, of course, is theism. There's in that toolbox is a crayon called belief or disbelief in a God. And often not other kinds of crayons. Or when we get rid of that crayon and say, well, I don't believe that, we still don't realize we're operating with a lot of beliefs that were actually shaped by the predominant Christian culture, right? Many things, even secularism, is actually shaped by Christian religion. many of those things. Freedom. Why do we as a country have so many people who focus so much on individualism? And that was so important to the early Calvinists, that you were in charge of your own religious destiny and those kinds of stuff. And we sacrifice community sometimes for the sense of my own individual choices. And that was handed to us by that same dominant Christian culture. So you leave maybe theistic belief, you lose a belief in God maybe, but you maybe kept other crayons in your little color box. And so part of what I do is to say to people, have you questioned some of the other assumptions that we have, that we're all handed? We're all shaped by our cultures and identities, and that's, to a certain extent, is a good thing. That's how we get along as humans. We're very tribal. But it's also can sway us to think that there are only certain choices. It limits our possibilities. It limits what we can see. It limits perceptions even. And so the first thing I would say to people is you have to leave two things. You have to leave, I would say if you make that choice to leave belief in a God, you need to realize that many people still hold on to other beliefs that were shaped by those religious identities over time. And sometimes we had to question those things as well. And you had to go through like a second coming out, shall we say, doing that.
That's what I would say is central to the process of deconstruction, which is very important.
Sure.
To the whole process. Yeah, that's...
It's
not just this one thing, belief in God, okay, but all of these other things as well that grow out of that have to be questioned. And also, your map of reality, understanding that it's not the thing that it's mapping, which is what you're taught in religion. I think, to me, please feel free to weigh in, is that's the biggest wrong tool that you get from a religion is telling us, no, everything that's real and that exists is contained within this framework. No, this is that around you, that's not the world. This is the world. It's in this book right here. And there you go.
That's that narrowing of perception.
One crayon, baby.
Right.
But,
when I think of the word deconstruction, I think of the philosopher Jacques Derrida, who kind of was the big French philosopher looking into deconstruction. And they were all pretty much Marxist, and they want to understand what happened to the Marxist revolution. Why didn't the workers rise up? Why did all these things that were supposed to happen didn't happen? It was part of the Frankfurt School, right? There was another group of philosophers who dug into that question, like, what happened? Why did we stay there? And Derrida is one of those who basically said that maybe there's something about these ideas, the tools that we use, that actually shape our way of what we accept, what we believe are our rights, what we think are our abilities. All that stuff needs to be deconstructed. So we can look at what holds power over us, those ideas, where did they come from? And that is kind of what we're talking about, that it's not just simply, okay, I've eliminated one kind of belief, and I don't think that's important. But they would say, these kind of philosophers, that there are many other ideas that get shaped by cultures and backgrounds and traditions that we have to question as well. And they're great questions. We deconstruct things all the time. And that's a healthy process for anyone who's trying to decide they're gay, or if they're women, if they're people of color. We all, atheists and agnostics, they go through this process of once you first say, I'm not that other thing anymore, they have to, the second thing, I think they have to deconstruct the other beliefs that were put together. And a lot of famous feminist philosophers, that's what they focused on, like Haraway and some others like that. Let's deconstruct these ideas. And why do we think of the world this way? There are multiple ways of thinking about the world. So that would be my second thing you need to do. I would say you can't do that on your own. I say you need to do that with a group. But yeah.
Interesting. So you can do it with the New York Society for Ethical Culture. You can do it with a humanist organization in United States. Yeah. But if you outside of United States, or in some country that you cannot do that by yourself, what's the right way to do it?
And unfortunately, in some countries, it's dangerous, right? If I were to come to another person and say, I'm having these doubts, you, I'm sure, can talk a lot about that. And that makes it where most people may sit inside their own journey and not extend beyond that because there's just not those safe groups. That's, to me, why being in a congregation which is non-theistic, which is what I'm a minister in a congregation that doesn't have a belief in God, why it's so important, why groups are important. Because it reminds us that, first of all, other people share these beliefs. that we're not alone, we're not isolated, and that basically we need support, right? Because I love it, the fact that I have all these friends of mine who are pretty radical, and they're always asking me, like, why is that crayon, they use my same metaphor, why did you use that belief that way? And that's what our friends do, right? That's what a congregation can do in ways that I cannot do on my own. I can't catch myself. A shout out to my son, who's I adopted, he's Dominican, and he always catches me with verbiage, language, things like that, which he goes, that's a pretty Western capitalist way of looking at the world. And I love that. I love that he catches me in those things, because when you're enculturated and you have these set of blinders that we use for looking at the world, you need another person to say, have you thought about maybe looking a little wider, these kind of stuff. And that's why we need people. Even your other third step is coming out, questioning your motives, but the other thing is finding a group. It really is important that you do that.
Yeah.
And you want to be careful about the group you find.
That's
You don't want to go from one situation where you're being controlled to another situation.
Absolutely.
Where you're being controlled. And I'm smiling to myself while you're talking about deconstruction and where that fits into a congregation. Most organizations or even communities will help you deconstruct your past beliefs, but they'll only help you in such a way as to make it easy for you to accept these new beliefs.
That's right. Yep.
And that's as far as they'll go. So just because somebody's helping you with a deconstruction process doesn't mean that their aim is to get you to a place where you have freedom of thought.
Sure.
They might want to just contain you in something else. Yeah.
Certainty is one of those crayons that we're handed in the West. We want a quest for certainty. We want to know the right answer, the right thing to do, as if these things existed out there. But for those of us who believe in evolution and a chance of being on this planet, I would say, those answers are not necessarily written in the stars anywhere, that some of those things are just created by us. And that was Jean-Paul Sartre's and the existentialist whole work, is to question, why do we believe what we believe? That was Friedrich Nietzsche. There were a lot of philosophers who did that. But we seem to be in the West on a quest for certainty. John Dewey was the philosopher who pointed out, if you go back 2,000 years ago, that was the main thing the Greeks were looking for, because in a pre-mathematical, pre-scientific society, if the world is constantly in changes, how can there be a basis for truth? That was their problem, right? What is the basis for truth? How do you know something? And they wanted that certainty to a certain extent. And it's only in the modern world, and in certain cultures around the world who came to the same conclusion, that we know actually certainty is something we also have to let go of, that we are becoming, that we're emerging, that we're all these things, and we have to be acceptable that we don't have all the final answers for all kinds of stuff. But we're driven in the West for that. And so it's easy for a group to say, oh, yeah, you didn't get the answers from there. Here's the new set of answers. And then our brain goes, oh, okay, I'm going to snap mine perception from here to here. And I would say, you're kind of making the same error that got you in the first place.
Well, most people prefer certainty when
do.
they can get it. I would prefer certainty. I don't want to worry about what's going to happen when I put my foot on the ground ahead of me. Some of that's built into being able to survive through the next 24 minutes, much less hours.
What we all want is that knowing that's biologically driven. Our homeostatic need is to have a sense of certainty about those. The problem is to what limit is that somewhat self-delusional, that we would do that. All the ancient philosophers want what Euclid had done. Euclid was a great mathematician. We call him the father of geometry. We've all studied his religion called geometry. It's a very successful one. He started with a set of axioms. Here are some beliefs. And he had five simple axioms. And with those sets of beliefs, he could construct the entire nature of geometry. It wasn't until the modern era that we had non-Euclidean math and stuff, but it works 99% of the time. If you learn Euclid, learn geometry, I teach construction, 9.9% of the time you're accurate. Other people wanted that. They thought, man, what if we just come with a set of basic beliefs that are true without question, like in math. He not only came up with the axioms, he came up with the proofs. Here's how to prove that that thing is right? And here's my 5 axioms. Here's how I prove them. Undisputable, right? Perfectly clear. And then with that, I construct the nature of reality. And other groups wanted that. They wanted that ability to do that. That's what the scholastics did in the Middle Ages. Man, if we just start with some basic principles, we all accept this principle 1, principle 2, I can construct the nature of reality from that. And the problem with that is that what they were basing it on was not mathematical proof. They were basing it on religious documents and dogmas, right? If the Bible says this, it must be true. I will accept this as an axiom. The problem is when they did their math, shall we say, they follow things to their logical conclusion, they had 2 problems, big problems we say in philosophy. They didn't have coherence. They could say something was true here and this was true even though they were diametrically opposed, right? You can't do that in philosophy. And they said a bunch of things which had a correspondence problem. So there's a coherence problem and the second was correspondent. It didn't match the world, right? The nature of reality. They said things because they were basing this stuff on
very inconvenient.
And we've always looked for that. And the closest people ever thought we would ever get to that was through mathematics, which was fine until 1930s when Curt Gödel published his famous book called the Incompleteness Theorems, and he basically said mathematics has the same problem. And it was upsetting to everybody. They all wanted to prove Curt Gödel was a little mathematician at Princeton University, and a quiet guy, but a master logician. He says, no, math has the same problems. But Darwin had already done that with evolution. Notice the book you were reading, and, we used to have a notion about essentialism. There was only one kind of thing in the world. It was made this way, and this was essential, and there was nothing like that, and people couldn't believe that things morphed and changed until Darwin says, actually, they're all kind of the same stuff of life, just in different situations, right? One very simple way of saying that. So what Darwin did to essentialism, what Curt Gödel did to logical certainty in mathematics, that's the world we also live in. And there's only a level of certainty that we will ever be able to attain. But we're drawn toward, right? And so our societies and groups will hand you a sense of certainty. And one of the things you have to do as a philosopher, as a mathematician, as a scientist, and as just any ordinary person, is you have to be able to live with uncertainty and just accept that. We will never have a full understanding of the nature of reality. And it's a good thing because it's emergent, right? It's changing. And groups will always try and codify some new set of rules and put it in some other book and try and get all assigned to it. There are prescriptive belief systems. And then reality shifts, and we're trying to correct that. And reality trip, I teach the philosophy of science. That was Thomas Kuhn's whole thing. That's even science does that. So that's the other crayon, right? That's one example of that quest for certainty and knowledge. And we're all susceptible for those reasons. You gave perfectly good reasons why we want that. But we should always realize that that's all just going to take me so far. We don't have all the answers, and we just need to find out maybe some things that work, but also be able to adapt and to change once that changes as well. It's kind of a sense of humility for me that I don't know all the answers, and I never will. No one ever will. And can I live in a world like that?
Interesting. What religion provide to Homo sapien? What humanism or a secular organization do provide to Homo sapien to make him live a comfortable life, even if they don't have the full answer for everything?
There's a famous neuroscientist, originally Portuguese, and taught in California for a long time, named Antonio Damasio. And Antonio Damasio is amazing. I highly recommend people read his books. I just I adore the guy. And basically he said, we're all just biological organisms, right? After you get to the heart of it, we're all biologically different species, and one of the things we want is homeostasis. We want balance. We want harmony. We want not too hot, not too cold. We want water. We want safety. We want security. We want all these things. And according to Damasio, his theory is that because we're biologically driven for those things, we want certainty. We want what religion can offer. Here's the answers. Here's where things are going to come. And even if they're bad, here's how it turns out. And he says because of that, our brain rationalizes all kinds of things, right? Biologically driven, we rationalize to accept a bunch of things because, okay, I got the answer. I know where my culture says this is where truth comes from. My religion says this is what the absolute thing is. And I don't need to see anything or hear anything or really explore anything beyond that because I've already got all those answers. The problem is the world's not made like that, right? The world is more in flux. And that was the same thing as he said, is just remember where we're starting from. And you and I may come from radically different backgrounds and cultures. We're in those cultures. They give us a set of beliefs and truths. We wrap those around us like a series of cloaks. But when we encounter each other, we come from radically different backgrounds. Like, why are you believe that? And we're pulling at the cloaks rather than thinking about what is the thing that drove us all? What's the similarity, which is this basic need to exist for those stuff. Adler recognized in himself. He said, listen, let's don't argue or quibble over superficial differences. Let's go back and figure out that we all want these things. Let's just start there. Can we affirm the worth and dignity of the person in front of me? The more I've done that in my own life, just focusing on the person in front of me and affirming the worth and dignity. Do people have health care? Do they have housing? Do they have a job? Right? It's systemic too. It just can't say, are you okay, man? Good. Hope you do well. That's not enough for me. That wasn't enough for Adler. He knew that once we affirm the worth and dignity, which includes affordable health care and education and access and freedom and all stuff, once those people have those things, once those deeper needs are met, and Antonio Damasio would agree, then people can talk about all other kinds of things. And so why are we arguing over what you believe or what your book said or what this philosophy is and stuff? I start with, hey, did you have enough food today? Do you have a place to live? Do you have a job? Do you have a future? Do you have all those things?
Interesting. What Curt Collier do believe?
What do I believe? I believe that we're in a really cool place called Earth. I believe that Earth is this kind of pulse of life that's driving it, that's filled with all kinds of possibilities. I believe that we're not limited, except for biological limits, to do anything or build any other kind of society. And I believe in other people. I believe in listening to their stories, and maybe not the exact word for word. Maybe I don't believe those things, but I believe the desire behind it, right? I'm asking that question when someone's sharing things to me, and I'm listening to what they're saying, but I'm also going, I resonate with that, right? Maybe I don't agree with them because I don't agree with their religious beliefs or their political beliefs, but deep down, humans are pretty much having the same conversation. And once you realize that the deep level that we're having similar conversations, then we can meet each other there. That's the common ground where I want to come and meet you at. I'm not going to believe what you believe. I may dismiss your notions of politics and certainly religion, but you're a human and I'm human, and we have more in like than we are different. And I believe in that. I believe in that possibility. And I think once we're ever to get to a place where we'd say, listen, that's what we all want. We want what all species, I'm a naturalist, right? And an environmentalist. Life wants to exist. It wants to thrive. It wants to grow. It wants to do all these things. They may put them in all kinds of words. Humans put everything into categories. We have answers. We put them in boxes. But the instinct between us and a seahorse is exactly the same. And what I'm trying to do is to make sure that we kind of meet at that level and see where we go from there. I don't want all of us to believe the same things. I don't want all of us to perceive the world the same way.
Right.
I want you to perceive the world the way you do and you perceive, and somewhere we're all something bigger than even my limited perception, because I go, man, you just opened my mind a little bit more. And that's pretty cool. I want to know what that is.
Interesting answer. Thank you, Professor Curt, for this. How we can build a new foundation for a person who doesn't want to believe in Christianity, doesn't want to believe in Islam, doesn't want to believe in maybe the old way, old-fashioned religion, and want to build a new foundation to view the world and view themselves differently, especially if they are from LGBTQ or they have a different reason, women or other different things. Thank you.
I mean, Damasio goes a little deeper than what I was even talking about. Or let's say that we have these deeper needs we want the answers to, and we find something that gets answered. That's a pretty strong connection. Right? I've already given all my answers. I don't need to hear anything else from you. And I come up and I say, oh, is that true? Or maybe we could do something different. And Damasio would say, no, that's actually a pretty strong connection, and people will fight you over it. You're pulling at something that's deeply tied to their own sense of being and well-being. There's a new book out by Zamograd, and that's what she says, is basically that we're susceptible. All of us are susceptible to finding quick answers and solutions to all this stuff. And some of us more than others, and they will fight you for it. And they will try to stop you and anything you can, because the idea of those things could be so frightening. And it's not that we're quibbling over ideas. For them, it's my whole nature of how am I living? How am I existing? What's going to happen to me? And they go to very, very deep fears, he says. And to me, that's what I notice more often when I'm working for community revitalization projects or working with people who change religions and all this kind of stuff, that other people are very frightened by that prospect, because we have that, as Dewey called it great, the quest for certainty. We are on a quest. That was the title of his book. We are on a quest for certainty. I love that vision. Like, people are searching for that thing, and then they find it and they lock onto it. And we don't change our beliefs like we change our clothes, and then like, oh, today I'm going to wear this or I'm going to wear that. Those things are deeply tied to us. And so your question is to realize, I think it's a waste of time for me to quibble with people's religious beliefs. That may be interesting, and I could go there, and you and I were sitting over a cup of coffee, and we may do that, if you have permission for me to do that. But for me, it's not where I put my energy in as someone who does community redevelopment and those things. I really want to go back to those essential questions about housing, healthcare, food, water, shelter. And, it's interesting. There was a very interesting study that was done in Europe. Europeans used to be as religious as Americans. Deeply, Italians and French. These were deeply, deeply religious people, just like us. They were just like Americans to a certain extent. And then World War II happens, and suddenly they're not religious anymore. And a lot of people went to the fact where they lost a belief in God. They lost hope in that kind of system. It was the darkness of World War II led most people to make a break with God. That's an interesting prospect, but I don't think that's really what happened. I believe this other group of philosophers and scientists, social scientists, who said, well, after World War II, they built pretty extensive social security nets to raise people out of abject poverty, right? They destroyed the farms, the factories, the cities. People were dying. There was no healthcare, no hospitals. And so suddenly all those nations said, hey, let's restore our social safety nets. They didn't say, don't believe in God, don't do religion. The interesting thing is that every time we have a country that lifts people out of poverty and does those things and provides a true safety net, right? Access to health care, access to education, guaranteed right for housing, that group becomes more secular. So the question is, did they leave religion because of the horrors of World War II? Certainly that was true for some people. But for other people, it's like, maybe I don't need those things anymore. Maybe we can build a system. Well, which country doesn't guarantee you health care? Which country doesn't guarantee you housing? Which country says to people, oh my God, you're taking food, you're getting $167 a month to feed your family of 5. That's awful, you should be at work. That's us. And what nation is still religious? And I sometimes believe that theory. I can see there's complications. Everything's complex. But I believe that. And I believe that my focus is not just on changing people's beliefs. It's not on wrestling with ideas, because I know how those get tied in. It's providing maybe other forms of certainty. You have a right to health care. You have a right to education. You have a right to think. And I think the more we focus on those things, I sometimes wonder, would this be a different country?
I think it would be.
Well, the evidence supports it, because every nation that has moved in that direction becomes more secular. And so I think Damasio, what he was saying essentially is correct, that we have these deeper needs. And sometimes when you meet those deeper needs, people go, maybe I don't need this other kind of belief in afterlife, or Daddy God's going to rescue all of us, or something like that.
As far as I can see, one of the fundamental purposes of religion is to give you artificial certainty.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, everything might be, the crops might fail any minute, and there could be another famine, or there could be another epidemic, or any of this could happen at a moment's notice. But as long as we believe the same thing, things will work out.
And do the same rituals.
And do the same rituals, and make sure that nobody's around to who's in any way different, to dilute this holiness, everything will be okay in the end. And that's getting back to your point about homeostasis. It's, I see that as a function of religion. They just want that certainty.
I'm not a conspiratorial thinker. That's not where my mind goes. But sometimes I've heard a lot of people say that the conservative right doesn't want a social security net because they know what I just said, and they know that people will tend to focus more on religion if they were to not provide universal health care, not provide education, just pull yourself up by your own bootstraps. That's another crayon that we've been handed, is that we don't need other people. You should be self-reliant. I mean, Emerson wrote his own book on self-reliance. Great guy, fantastic. I love Emerson. But this notion we had that there should be no mediator between you and a God, that was the Calvinist notion, right? You don't need a church. You don't need the sacraments. You don't need this stuff. You only just by your own personal beliefs, that's all you need. And to me, that comes right out of Calvinism. It matches a lot of the ideas from Calvinism. And I think it was highly destructive to our culture. That notion that we don't need, we can make it on our own. Horatio Alger and the pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, and the Lone Ranger who doesn't live in community, who comes into town, fights the bad guys, but then rides off alone in the sunset. We have this deep cultural belief that I don't need you. And this exacerbates it because I can order DoorDash, I can do anything. This false sense of illusion that this is all I need and I don't need y'all anymore. And that's a problem, right? We're seeing civic engagement in the United States plummet, right? From most Americans used to belong to some civic group like elk or moose, or they went to churches, they belonged to congregations.
Or who knows what, I mean, the bowling league, wasn't that the book? Somebody,
Robert
I forget
Putnam, Bowling Alone.
Bowling Alone, I mean, that was his metaphor for the entire problem. And I just want to briefly circle back to your what you were saying about conspiracy thinking. That's exactly what I think. I think that different political movements work towards conditions that further their primacy.
Sure.
So if you're looking for religion to be one of the foundations of your entire society, of course you're going to be against public education. Sure. Of course you're going to be against all of these social programs, because that's stuff that the churches should be doing. And I don't think that's conspiracy at all. I think that's these people working towards them running stuff.
And this notion of a limited government, right? Their old belief of self-reliance actually makes people more reliant. They just don't realize that. Right, because now people don't have the tools for their own self-determination. They don't have access to job, health care, affordable housing.
Please talk about a fantasy. It's the blue states in this country are buying stop signs for the red states. These people can't finance their own basic civic needs without my tax money. So, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. Good God.
All that stuff. And
what a fantasy.
That's one of those crayons that's heavily in our culture, because you say to someone, we were all victims of the Cold War. We didn't realize the damage that the battle had done to us.
Yeah.
Is that anything that looked like collectivism, anything that looked like people working together, was labeled as communism, which became the ultimate sin in this country, right?
The great Satan.
That was the great Satan. And that was the consciousness change that we all went through, that any form of collectivism. Look at the current administration or whatever. You even talk about, we should provide this, and they go, it's communism. They can't even tell the difference between Mandami and Stalin, and their minds are the same thing. And you're going, it's just ridiculous, right? Are you really that illiterate about politics and economics that
they're not kidding?
Or are you that smart that you're going to use it as a manipulation?
Well, the people who are running these groups are that smart.
And we're susceptible to it because that's one of the beliefs that we're handed. And that's one of the things we have to unpack, that you can't do it by yourself. We are a communal species. That's how we punish people. We put them in solitary confinement. And we have all these things that happen in our culture which alienate us more and more from each other, which is it's a formula for madness, right? Like Tom Hanks on the island with the soccer ball, he turns it into a being because we need human contact. And So they're creating not more independence, they're actually creating more dependence.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a different kind of independence. They say, well, we're creating dependence by handing people a check. No, we're actually just giving people food. Right? That's good stuff. You're making sure a family has enough to eat, they have enough nutrition, that we have the right kinds of things on our table, that we have a balanced diet, right? You lift up people health-wise in those ways, they're more likely to go out and find a job and do all the things you want them to do. They're going the opposite direction. Oh no, we're creating dependence by that. I'm like, because you all need to be, pull yourself up by your own bootstrap. And I go, do you know that's an illusion? It's not true. So anyway, that's why I'm out there fighting in the barricades.
Which sort of brings us around to a question that you and I had been discussing earlier, which is, okay, given these various factors and features that we've been looking at, including the growing alienation that's going on, something that to me as an old guy of 64, I'm just floored by the extent of it, the length of it.
Yeah.
I mean, our teenagers, when I was a teenager, sort of like hung around with other,
That's right.
people. Not anyway, be that as it may. A question I'd really love to hear you weigh in on it is, I'll just put it to you from my point of view, is I talk to people all the time, and I'm interested in, well, what do they believe? What's their philosophy? I may not be looking to get into a deep, heavy discussion with them about it, but just a few basic things is always interesting to know. And, when I say, well, I'm a humanist, in the course of that conversation, and they're like, well, generally, first of all, and here's my first question, is humanism, what's that? And I hear that all the time from educated people. So we've got something good here in terms of an organizing principle for a rational society, or as I like to put it, we've got an organizing principle for a community where you're being taught how to think, not just taught what to think, which I would argue, and Saeed's heard all of this way too many times at this point, which I would argue is actually the winning way to run a community, given the new environment we have of existing in this information age, where you need lots of fully functioning human minds in order to get the most out of this kind of environment. Okay, so whatever our faults or problems, I think that we've got one of the good formulas for moving to this stage of human civilization, or whatever you want to call it. Okay, this is good. How come nobody's heard of humanism? Okay. And how do we provide this as a real option for all of these people who are bobbing around out there without community and need community? And while we're at it, they would probably be better off if they were involved in a community that was helping them cultivate certain values. And I'm saying, I mean this as opposed to like saying a bunch of gamers online, where you're teaching each other how to be a great gamer, but there's no values being promoted there generally. So given that, when I talk to these nuns, as Pew research calls them, they mark their religious affiliation down as like nun. Given that, when you talk to these nuns, and I say, humanism, that's, we don't believe in anything supernatural, and we believe in other human beings, so we base our ethics on actual effects on other human beings rather than something like revelation. And that's it. That's my elevator speech for what humanism is. Basically those two things, with the thing about, basing our morals and ethics on observable stuff rather than, what's on the stone tablets. Yeah. And they'll say to me, almost without fail, what I hear is, that's pretty much what I believe. So in one way of looking at it is, we've got all of these people who essentially already believe the same stuff that we're labeling humanism bobbing around.
Right.
And, I feel in a way semi-responsible for this, because I think it's when you have something that's good, really good, given that what we're promoting here is for the purpose of freedom, and circling back to what you said earlier, nobody I know of who is a humanist has as their vision of victory every single man, woman, and child on earth will bow fealty to some humanist, imam or pope or whatever you want to call it in the end, and then we will know that humanism has won. Absolutely not. I'm with you. The humanists I know all want a thriving ecosystem of ideas with different philosophies, communities based on those philosophies, people sometimes competing, sometimes cooperating. So I even think that's the winning goal in a global civilization. So given these things, what do we do? What do we do? What are we doing wrong? That's the first thing I would really like to hear some more leaders in the community weigh in on. And knowing this, what could we do to fix it?
Lots of questions, lots of good stuff in there.
Yeah.
I'll quibble over one little term. I am not a capital H humanist. I teach philosophy, and I know the difference in that, but I know you mean the lowercase humanistic.
A free thinker of some kind.
Of ideas and stuff like that. I think, and not you, but when some humanist groups make the mistake of they just substitute one set of ideas and beliefs for another, and it's handed to people prescriptively. Oh, here's what we believe. We don't believe these things. We believe these things. And that feeds into some of my deeper beliefs about connections with homeostasis and stuff like that. I myself am, since I teach philosophy, I know that the word humanism means something different for me too. And I'm actually what's called an ethical biocentrist. Those are all just terms we could quibble about. I want to go back to the thing that you said that I agree 100% with, which is that we want a culture that cultivates new ethical insights and new beliefs. Yes. I'm actually less interested than finding out what are the answers. I think we're too susceptible to that. We got it worked out. I mean, how many times did they rewrite the Humanist Manifesto, right? We should have got it one and done, right? Well, we're up version 5 or 6 or whatever they're doing now, and it's and I signed it at one time. And I just go, that's the wrong approach for me, because we look back at Humanist Manifesto 1, we go, oh my God, I can't believe people believe that. That was 1930s. That wasn't that long ago. And so the danger is that we think we're going to come up with one just science sets of beliefs. What I would instead get us to focus on are what are the best processes that we have for cultivating new insights. I love the fact you use the word cultivate. It's tied to cultus, which is the ancient term for putting things in the ground and cultivating, right? That's cultivation one. It had a very natural earth base built to it. And I am more interested, and I think Felix Adler was, which is I don't want to come up with a new set of beliefs. People have already enough beliefs already. Let's get rid of that crayon that we had to have just one set of ideas. But what are the ways that we can engage one another that allow new ideas to come from? And the distinction I would make between some of that is academic, some of it's reflective. Gay groups and feminist groups and people of color occasionally should pull back and reflect on their experiences and shape those ideas. I only think that takes us so far. One of the problems we have is that we're in an environment, a greater systemic culture, which shapes even the ideas that we want. I may believe in the environment, and I think that dropping my can in the trash can is going to save the planet and stuff, but I don't mean to poo-poo that. Whereas we're in a system that's grinding up the earth, and we're somehow participating in that as well, right? These larger systemic things which keep us exactly where we are is what I'm interested in. That's that, as you said, that deconstruction that needs to happen. So even if I was a rational actor with the best critical thinking and I had the best ethical moral development within myself, I'm participating in systems that are slowly destroying our planet, destroying other humans, and causing all these problems. So it's not something we can just do with critical thinking alone. Trust me, I'm a professor, I teach science. I know that's important. But unless we have new systemic approaches to why we do the things that we do and how can we do that. And sometimes I think it's going to come from logic. It's going to come from academia. It's going to come from self-reflection. It's going to come from art and musical. One of the questions is, why did New York become one of the greatest cities in the world? And what's amazing, what separates New York City from maybe Oklahoma City or some other place, is you have 2,000 stages that are active tonight. And people are storytelling, and people are doing narratives, and people are representing things. And you have a culture. There's several cities, cultural centers around the world, Paris and London and Mexico City and Tokyo, where people are doing as much theater as we do here in New York. And those places are amazing, vibrant places, right? That whole narrative and storytelling. But we also need new innovations. We need new technologies. We need to reinvent the stuff that's going on in the world. We have this climate change rushing towards us, right? We're participating in the same systems over and over again. And even though I may have all the right beliefs and I'm, critically thinking and open, I'm participating in other ways that are bringing about the destruction of my planet. And so we have to have a multivariate approach to all kinds of stuff. And I think the first thing is to ask the question, not what should we believe, but what are the processes that we can do that are going to allow us to have new insights that are going to stop us from doing the stuff we do over and over again, right? What is that? Adler's wasn't saying, oh, you should do this, you should do that. He said, act to elicit the best in another person, because you're bringing out their unique insights, which may not be the same as yours. But as you do that, something new emerges in yourself, which could be transformational. I don't believe in prescriptive belief systems. I believe in generative practices, right? I want to do something. What do we do? Acting to elicit, working on affirming worth and dignity, building new housing and healthcare systems and all this kind of stuff. The more we do that, I think what even we thought was the best critical mind, we may realize, wow, there's so much more out there to see. And I'm not poo-pooing those things. I think they are important, but we cannot think ourselves into a future. We really can't. We cannot think ourselves into a future. We can only build our way into a future. We can only act our way into a future and do those things. So I, as an ethicist, decided I was going to leave the pulpit, which is what I did. And for almost 20 years now, 25 years now, I've been out in the world teaching young adults, giving them skills, doing self-determination, doing community revitalization projects. And those are alongside the other thing that needs to happen, which is to have people come back and say, what happened to us? Why did we get here? Why do we have these beliefs? Why do we accept these systems? Why did we make the United States does the same errors over and over again. If you're really good at history, you'll go, we've seen this before. We've seen this before multiple times. And then I would ask people, why do you think we end up at the same dead end and dead end and dead end? And I would say, maybe we're starting with the wrong sets of beliefs. Maybe we need to do something. And I would think, well, what if we just came with the right set of beliefs and hand that to people? And then I realized, no, because no one knows that. It's not going to be something any of us can formulate. What instead is, do we have the right practices? Like freedom from religion, right? Like the ability to do those things. What are the guarantees that allow all of us? And I'll tell you right now, a lot of people are sitting at home right now, even listening maybe to this podcast. They're worried about, how am I going to pay the rent? Right. Where's my food coming from? I got health care. I've got mental wellness issues to deal with, or someone in my family I deeply care about. And how can I do anything if I can't even do those things? And that's where I personally put my energy. Let me lift those things out, and thoughts and beliefs and ideas will kind of work their way. Because one of the Christian beliefs that we were handed is, if you change hearts and minds, you'll change the world. By the way, that goes back to ancient Greeks too. Change hearts and beliefs and minds, you change the world. And that's deeply entrenched in our culture. And the absolute truth is, actually, no, it's the other side around. You change the world and you change hearts and beliefs, in my book. And I'm more interested in doing those things, just like we talked about secularism in Europe, that sometimes when we change environments, people respond to those things differently. And so the question is that any of us can do is just looking at our neighborhood and saying, what is stopping us? What's the thing that's keeping us down? And most of us, think of that. We're in the wealthiest country in the world, and you can't even try to get a mental health check for your child. Try to get healthcare for you. Try to get prep on, the things we know. We could get rid of AIDS. We could do all kinds of stuff. And we don't do any of those things. Oh. So the question is not what are the best, how could I enculturate people and get them smart and intelligent when the next minute they're participating in systems that don't allow for any of that. And so that's where I shifted my focus on. All those things are needed. All that work is good. Getting people to think and reflect, but then act. The second thing after that is reflect, ask questions, arrive at new understanding, and then to me, engage. Then come back out of that space and say, we need to engage. We need all of you out there engaging with the community, joining an organization, getting organized, and doing those things. And the American response is, I don't need other people, I just need myself. I'm like, no, I don't think you do. I think you need others. I think you need a group. I think you need to belong to something. That's when you really find out what's possible within yourself as well. So I don't have an easy answer for you. I only have a set of practices, right? Engage, act, elicit, build, innovate. Those are the things I focus on, and those don't have a final destination per se. It's a fine hair. Mm-hmm. I get your point, but that's what I try to do.
Thank you, Professor Curt Collier, for sharing your thought to the audience. And we have only a few minutes left. Would you like to say something before we close this podcast?
I think we have very similar goals, that's for sure, all of us. And that's the part where you talk to those people, and I do all the time, every day. They may not be the people with the highest levels of education, they don't have all the degrees, but they do get exactly what we're saying. I think if you ask people to stop, I've noticed that when I start the conversation with, how did you get here today? Where'd you had your education? What's going to food and all that stuff? That the conversation shifts. And so I love the work you're doing because you're asking people questions and getting them to reflect. We do need to do that. I would tell people unpack, reflect, go, wow, maybe we could do this, but then get engaged and join something. You got to join something. Join a group.
Interesting.
The right group, as you said.
Right group, yeah. And would like to thank also Vincent Downing for being here. Visit Bergen County for Ethical Society.
Sure. Come to the New York Society for Ethical Culture, or come in TNEC to the Bergen Ethical Society. Love to meet you.
Yeah. Thank you very much, and have a great day.
You too. Thank you all.
Thank you.